This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Today we're dealing with a Subzero ice maker that is not producing ice. So we're going to do a little diagnostic and replace it. First I'm going to turn the settings in the freezer and the fridge to their highest setting, and that'll turn off the compressor. You can also unplug it, or you can turn off the breaker. There's two controls in the back, and the one for the freezer, if you turn it to the highest setting for warmest, it'll turn off the compressor and the fans. So for the Subzero, we're going to then pull out the ice bin, and we're going to grab the whole freezer assembly and lift it up slightly and then pull it right off the rail. So it comes off pretty easy, lifting a little bit and then pulling it straight off. Here's our new ice maker. Here's the model number. And there's a little heater that's built into it that helps to melt the ice a little bit when it's ready for the harvest. Here's the old one. So in this case, probably didn't even need a new ice maker. It most likely was just the freezer settings were too high. Here's the little arm that comes with it, and it has an extension, a plastic extension that you clip on. This is on the new ice maker. So we did put a new ice maker on, but it turned out that the fill tube was just iced up, and that's why the water couldn't come in to make new ice. And that was due to, instead of being at the factory setting of 5, it was at the setting of 8, so it was just way too cold. We're putting on the arm, and now we're going to take off the old one. There's 3 Phillips head screws holding it on, one here at the bottom, and then there's 2 near the top. Putting these little rubber pieces come with it, and these go on the railing where the ice bin fits. It shows you in the directions where it goes. So they're made of rubber, and they have a split in them, so you can just pull them apart a little bit and then put them over this little piece of metal. It just raises the ice bin up slightly. We're just pulling the arm off of the old one so it's easier to get to the upper screws. I have a Phillips head screwdriver on a ratchet, and I'm gonna, because it's a little bit hard to get in there with a regular Phillips head, and I'm gonna zip those screws off, and then I can pull off the old ice maker. And it does have an electrical connector that we have to remove. We have to push down on that little pin. I'm using a small standard head screwdriver, and then I can push the modular electrical connector out. Pull that off, and here's the old ice maker, which I think probably was working, but it's just that no water was getting to it because of the frozen part. So here's a plate that you can take off, and you can put a wire between T and H, and if you do that on a machine, on an ice machine that's hooked up, it'll run a cycle. It'll put the water in, it'll turn, it'll harvest the ice, and it's one way of testing to see if your ice maker is working. With this one, when I did that, I didn't get any result because the water couldn't flow down because there was a big ice gap. I had to get rid of that. I'm just going to put the cap back on. One way you can get rid of that ice plug is if you can leave your freezer turned off and the door open for about 6 or 7 hours. That ice will melt. if you can't do that, then you can try to spray really hot water up into that chute, and that'll melt the ice. It's just kind of hard to do because the chute is up at a diagonal, so the water won't flow up. You have to kind of shoot it up there somehow. What I did with this one is I used this long screwdriver and I pushed it up into that water tube, and I wiggled it around to break up the ice, and then eventually I heated it up. Here I'm trying the hot water, spraying that up inside there to try to melt that ice, but just couldn't get it to really spray up in there. So I ended up heating up the long screwdriver with a lighter to get it pretty hot. Here we go. And I put that up in there, and that melted the ice. I had to do it about 4 times, and eventually I could feel that all the ice was gone. And then when I ended up installing the new ice maker, and after I think it was 12 hours, the customer reported that it was making tons of ice again. So that's what the problem was. Sometimes the ice makers themselves stop working because the motor gets jammed up or the motor gets tired. So this is the brand new one. We're putting the power modular jack in. We're going to make sure that the water fill tube is lined up with the ice maker. So when it's active, it'll shoot water into the ice maker. And here's the little screws I'm going to put it back up on. So I got the power hooked up, got the water lined up, and I'm going to get it up on these screws. And then I'll put in the 3 Phillips head screws that will hold it in place. Here's one at the bottom. And the ones at the top I'll put in by using the Phillips head driver with a little ratchet, because again, it's kind of hard to get to. I'm just testing the function of the arm, so that's moving really good. When the ice fills up enough, it lifts the arm, and that tells the ice maker not to make any more ice. And then when the ice is taken out, the arm drops, and that turns on the ice maker again. Pretty cool system. So you could, if you have no ice, you could have a situation like this one where the ice chute or the water fill tube was iced up. Could also be that the solenoid that opens it, lets the water flow in, is not working, or it could be the ice maker. So these are just some things you can test. So we're getting all those screws tight.
Consistently drain.
Now we're going to lift up the freezer door. And we'll get that lined up on the rails and then push that back in. Out of all the refrigerators, this freezer door comes off super easy. Other makes you have to do a lot more disassembly to get the freezer door off. Putting the ice bin back in, and then we'll make sure we get the temperature adjustments turned back up to 5 for the freezer and 5 for the refrigerator, and those are the factory settings.
I did.
This one was just turned up way too
parts.
high, and it froze that ice chute. So thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe when you get a chance.